Welcome into a Thursday, December 5th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today and use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk, and he is Frank Saravalli. And Frank, plenty to get to today after the official announcement of the Four Nations rosters.
Yeah, let's go. I love breaking this stuff down because, look, everyone's got their own opinion on what their roster would look like. And that's probably what made it so fun being in these management groups, is going back and forth with everyone.
Yeah, we're going to spend a lot of the show, or basically all of the show, breaking down the rosters. And then Carter Hutton is going to join us for the big segment, the Blue Paint. And he's going to talk about the goaltending on each roster. Also, we have our Dominion Lending Center's poll question live now in the YouTube chat, where you can have your say. Who is the biggest Four Nations roster snub? We got Zach Hyman, Tage Thompson, Evan Bouchard, and Mark Scheifele. Also, feel free to drop in a little write-in vote in the chat. We'll get to those a little bit later on, Frank. But let's kick it off with Canada locking in their roster. And there were a handful of legitimate surprises here for me. One, not having Zach Hyman on there. I think that's a notable omission, especially considering who was kind of picked above him. I raised an eyebrow at a Seth Jarvis. I even, going on that sort of left side and the guys who play that area, I think having all of Sorelli and Hagel, I know Sorelli's a centerman, and Bennett and Jarvis, I feel like they went too far in the direction of just get guys who are good defensively. They didn't focus enough on upside, but zeroing in on the forwards. Who were the big surprises for you?
Yeah, Zach Hyman to me stands out in a big way. I think there's a ton of recency bias there for the poor start to the season that he's had. When you look at the last number of years, he's fifth among all Canadian-born players in goals. And it's not just the goal scoring, it's also the connection that he has with Connor McDavid. And, when you're looking at a short tournament and trying to put that together where, you're looking for as much chemistry as you could possibly have, that stands out in a big way. Plus the fact that he's also, for my money, the best forechecking presence in the NHL. I call him a press player on our archetype series, and I don't think there's anyone better and more consistent at getting in and grinding and creating and winning battles. And I think you need that in a short tournament. And so for all those reasons, I would have gone with Zach Hyman over probably any number of 3 or 4 of the guys that you mentioned. But yet here we are, mostly in part due to his slow start to the year.
But doesn't it, again, this tournament is 2 months away. So isn't it kind of dumb to be picking the team with really that much thought into what's happened in the first 2 months of this season? Like, the guys who are hot or cold right now are not going to be the guys who are hot or cold in February. Like, it's just how that factored in so much seemingly to some of these decisions is crazy to me.
Well, so that's the interesting part about this, is that's the way they did the forward group. Yet if you're actually going on recency in terms of goaltending, they decided to go based on what happened years ago with Jordan Binnington winning a Stanley Cup and Aiden Hill winning a Stanley Cup, as opposed to what they're doing right now. And so I think that's the confusing part, is if you're probably asking or hoping or looking for more consistency. So I think there's some recency bias that crept into these selections. And then I also think that there's just some plain old, hey, this is my guy that I'm used to seeing so much. Here's his bias. And you see that a little bit with Anthony Cirelli. And clearly John Cooper had a big say in who was going to make this team. Same thing with Doug Armstrong in, Colton Parayko on the blue line. I'm not upset at all with the idea of going with Parayko, who I think is a way better defender than Evan Bouchard. You don't need Bouchard to quarterback your power play. You've got some guys that are going to do that for you. So when you take that out of the mix, if you're looking for the best all-around player, I think Parayko is kind of right there if you're not putting these guys on the power play. But that said, I think to say that there wasn't some recency or not just general bias as a whole connected with these selections, I think that kind of stands out.
Yeah, and listen, I'm with you. Evan Bouchard is not the guy I would have put on this, but I also don't think Colton Parayko is one of the 7 best Canadian defensemen in the league right now. I know Drew Doughty hasn't played, but that's a guy I would have given the nod to. I would have given the nod to Mackenzie Weegar, even a Noah Dobson before I took Colton Parayko.
Yeah, I'm okay with the Parayko selection. I don't think you can go wrong having some size, big game experience, and the ability to defend and take up time and space. That's never going to be an issue for me. So that part I'm not upset with, but I do think that there were some better selections that could have been made in the forward group.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back to the overarching view of this Canada team, there seemed to be no consistency in the line of thinking here. You talked about the goaltending and the fact that, again, they took Jordan Binnington, sub 900. Aiden Hill has been up and down this year. Sam Montembeau's been up and down. They leave off Thompson and Talbot. And I mean, Talbot, you can go back over a number of years. He's been one of the most consistent Canadian goalies. Then you look at the blue line where they clearly valued going with guys who have chemistry. Pietrangelo and Theodore, Taves and Makar. And then up front, they totally threw that out the window with no Zach Hyman. I even think, listen, Mark Scheifele would have been a good pick. Putting John Tavares next to Mitch Marner also probably would have been a fine pick on the fourth line. So why every single part of this roster, they seem to go at it in a totally different way. And I don't understand that.
Are there too many cooks in the kitchen?
I think so. And I think having a bunch of guys with allegiances to their current NHL teams is also a bit of a problem. Like, again, Bruce Cassidy he's an assistant coach, but he gets Aiden Hill, Pietrangelo, and Theodore. Not that I'm against Pietrangelo and Theodore, but Aiden Hill made me kind of raise an eyebrow. And you can obviously see Doug Armstrong's connection with Hockey Canada and Parayko and Binnington. I think there are too many cooks in the kitchen and too many cooks with a bias.
I would agree with you, but I would also add in that, look, this is still a really good team on paper. And so the big thing that you're going to have to weigh out as we now transition to the US side is, do you tend to lean more towards the team that has the three best players in the tournament and McDavid, McKinnon, and Makar? Or do you go with Team USA, who has the best goal scorer of their generation in Austin Matthews, the most effective pest in the NHL in Matthew Tkachuk, the reigning Norris Trophy winner in Quinn Hughes, and then the best goalie and in the tournament by a wide margin and a surefire Hall of Famer in Connor Hellebuck? I mean, to me, what we're looking at here is a coin flip between these two teams, and I don't think there's really much separating them.
Yeah, and if there's not much separating the two sides when you look at the forward group and, maybe you could say the defense, then you give the edge to the team with goaltending. So as we talk about Team USA, I'm less concerned about some of their questionable picks because at the end of the day, they have a goalie that can cover their flaws in Connor Hellebuck. But to talk about some of the, selections that made me raise an eyebrow, I thought having Chris Kreider on this team was a little bit questionable. I think Tage Thompson should have been in the mix. Like, I get the argument if we want to talk about like a Brock Nelson or a Chris Kreider, like, there are guys that can score, but that also bring you some size. But I think you could have gotten that with a Tage Thompson and putting him on the wing. So I didn't understand both Kreider and Nelson. I felt like if you wanted a vet, you had to pick one of them and you had to go with someone younger in that other spot.
Honestly, I don't really have much to pick at with this Team USA roster. And it's not because I'm American. It's just that I can see and understand their line of thinking. So if it comes down to Tage Thompson or Brock Nelson, yes, Thompson has better numbers in the NHL over the last handful of years, and he's definitely a higher ceiling player, and he's got the size at 6'6". But it's not like I look at Brock Nelson, who there's a slight drop off in goals, a slight drop off in points, and he's only 6'4" compared to 6'6". If you said to me, hey, I'm going to pick the better defensive player, which is clearly Nelson, and the guy who's way better in the faceoff dot in Nelson, okay, fine. I can understand that one. So park that. Trocheck and Kreider, I fully understand. I believe Chris Kreider is one of the very best, if not the number one net front presence players in the NHL. Trocheck and his versatility, the fact that he plays 4 minutes more a game than Kreider for the New York Rangers, gives you an indication of all the different areas of the game that Trocheck touches. And to me, I get those picks. When I'm looking at the rest of it, like, it all kind of seems to make sense. These are all the same group of guys that we've been talking about for Team USA for the last number of weeks, going back to December or November 1st or 2nd, when we made our first roster projections of this season. On the back end, you have guys that played their way onto this team. Zach Werenski, I think with the start of this season that he had, he found himself there. Noah Hannafin, I think, was on the outside looking in at the beginning of the year and has played pretty well. And his versatility, he's probably your seventh defenseman going into the tournament. The goaltenders spoke for themselves, but when I look at this group, yeah, are you leaving some talent on the table? I get that people feel strongly about Cole Caulfield as the best goal scorer of the season so far among American-born players. And same thing with some other guys that were left off of the team. You mentioned Thompson. I understand how they arrived at that point, and I think you can clearly see the line of thinking.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. I will say, looking at that forward group, some of the duos that we're going to get, that's going to make that Team USA a handful. If you're going with a top line that's Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, or a second line that's Brady, Matthew Tkachuk, and your top line has like Jack Hughes on the wing with Austin Matthews or something like that, man, that is a lot to deal with if you're anyone else in this tournament. Like the high-end skill in the US, I know you said Canada has the 3 best players, but as you start kind of widening the view, the edge goes more and more to Team USA.
Yeah, I think it's really close. Like I don't think Canada's forward group is anything to sneeze at. I think their defense is going to be a lot to handle from a physical perspective, and that's the one question mark that I have about Team USA is can their defense that's a little bit undersized, can that handle a vaunted Canadian attack? And I'm not sure the answer to that. Team USA is going to have 2 of their top 4 defensemen under 6 foot. Slavin and Hannafin are the biggest guys, and Hannafin might be the 7th guy. That they're 6'3". They're not giants. So that's, I think, a legitimate question to ask of this Team USA blue line, that they're able to skate. They've got great puck skills. Their mobility is awesome, but is that enough in a 4-game tournament, or do you need more?
So I have a couple of questions as we talk a little bit more about the snubs that we have in this tournament. Again, 2 months, more than 2 months until this tournament actually begins. There's probably going to be some injuries along the way, Frank. Do you think these groups, these management groups, already kind of have picked out like, okay, if we have an injury up front, it's Hyman. If we have an injury up front, it's Caulfield. Or do you think it's maybe more situational than that? And as another follow-up, if they go to these players at the beginning of the February, is there any fear amongst these management teams that a player might go, no, I'm already committed to taking my bye week, I'm going to rest up for my NHL team? Or does the looming Olympics kind of take any possibility of that away?
I think the Olympics is one of those situations where players are like, hey, if I could just get a crack and show what I can do and play my way onto that Olympic team, make myself an indispensable player, that it's probably going to be an easy yes. The tougher part is, will you say yes to give up your vacation to then be the 13th forward or then be the 7th defenseman? That's a lot bigger of an ask, which is again why there was kind of some science behind putting this team together and kind of deciding who might be your 13th and forward and 7th defenseman, because they kind of had this rule. Is like, no pricks. Like, we can't have anyone that's going to be pouting or sour about not playing. We need someone that's going to be a good guy, that can be a good teammate, and is happy to be there. And so that part draws in, but I do think they definitely have a list of 3 to 5 players that they're saying, here are our next guys up. Part of it will be situational, but part of them are kind of easy to guess. And, you know, we can talk about Caulfield and Thompson, and we can talk about Hyman and Bouchard and a bunch. Mark Scheifele, I think, is a huge glaring omission from Team Canada that didn't make it. For me, from the US, if you want to talk about how much American hockey has grown, the fact that you can take 46 goal, 109 point scorer in Jason Robertson and have him be a cut from this team, and also no one really even talks about it, that to me is fascinating. This is a guy that has played in tons of big games, back-to-back trips to the conference final with the Stars. And the fact that he didn't make it and no one really said anything, it was like, wow, that's how far Team USA has come in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is a short tournament. You're going to have to be damn near perfect to win it. And the 2 teams will be underdogs, but looking to be those disruptors. It's Finland and Sweden. I want to quickly talk about them before we get to our guy Carter Hutton here in a few minutes. But when you look at these 2 rosters at first, and it's more of just like my traditional brain, I was like, well, Sweden has the better chance of pulling off an upset. They should have more dynamic talent and all of that. But then I look, and Pat, flash up Team Finland here. You want to talk about guys that can totally change a game on one play. Mikko Rantanen, Alexander Barkov shutting down another team's top player, Sebastian Aho. Like, this forward group is actually pretty skilled in Finland. And if you know anything about Finnish hockey, you know these guys are just going to be working their bags off.
Well, that's the thing. Finland is going to be a really difficult out no matter what. And I also just look at this team, and they're an incredibly smart team. Barkov, Aho, Rantanen, Lundell, Hintz. Like, these guys can think their way across the ice. Arturi Lehkonen and his, the details to his game. I look at that group and I say, they may not be the most talented. They've got a little bit of size on their back end. They've got the ability to skate. They've got some toughness. And in Saros and net, look, I think on paper, Finland is the clear 4th most talented team. but you can crumble that paper up and throw it away in a 4-game tournament. Anything could happen. And I think the games between it's not going to be just Sweden and Finland that's going to be highly entertaining. Finland against either US or Canada too. I could see that being low scoring, difficult, grinded out hockey,
where goaltending could make a difference. Talk about that with Carter Hutton in a second, but then let's zero in on Team Sweden, because I look at some of their forwards, and the thing that kind of concerns me a little bit, Mika Zibanejad, history of no-showing. Elias Pettersson, history of no-showing. And I don't know if the depth is necessarily there with this team, but I will say I love that blue line in Sweden. Like, it's right up there with the rest of them in the tournament.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's good. Erik Karlsson, huge question mark. I mean, Elias Pettersson has played better of late, but he's been really just okay. Victor Arvidsson is hurt. Joel Eriksson Ek is hurt. Like, there's just, they've got Leo Carlsson, the only teenager in the tournament. This is a good team. There's no mistaking that. It's just, I think there's a bunch more question marks with this roster than some of the others.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's continue along with our show and get to the blue paint with Carter Hutton. It's brought to you by Fountain Tire. They treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle, whether it's new tires or maybe your engine has a little rattle. Stop in a Fountain Tire today and they'll sort you out. Plus, for the next 9 days, you can save $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, up until December 14th, plus an extra $50 on any service of $150 or more. Check out fountaintire.com. Always a pleasure to welcome in Carter Hutton, the former NHL goaltender, to the show for the blue paint. And Carter, it's been the big question for, it feels like, a year. The third goalie for Team Canada. They go with Montembeault. What do you make of the decision?
You know, I think a younger guy. I think this is a different situation for Canada, right? Where we look at some of the other teams where they have just that outright number one guy, right? Team USA don't really have this problem, right? This is an example of Binnington, Hill, guys who have been proven, but haven't really had stellar years. And we're not going to put them in the elite company right now in the NHL. But for Sam Montembeault, he has some upside. He is a kid that is going to gain some experience in this situation. And potentially when the tournament rolls around, he could be hot. He could be a guy that, you know, in this short little tournament, Canada is going to need a hot hand to try to push them over the top.
When you look at Binnington and Hill, I mean, again, they're kind of assumed to be, one of them will take the reins as the starter. Is there one of them stylistically that could work better with this Canadian team when you consider, hey, they picked a blue line with a lot of good defenders? They might not give up a lot.
You know, so Binnington is a guy who's a little more athletic, right? He's going to move around. He's going to chase the game. And a goalie who's been able to live up to the big moments, right? I think his whole career, you know, he's been a guy that we've pushed down to the minors. He's fought his way back, winning the Stanley Cup, playing well in big games. But for Adin Hill, he is a guy that benefits from predictable hockey, right? He's been behind a good back end in Vegas. He's going to have 2 of his defensemen there as well. And I think when the game becomes predictable, Adin Hill is a good guy that can be successful. And with all that being said, I know these teams have built their team. They've built for success, but you need a guy that can make big saves at the right time. And I think having these 2 guys as an option going into this is going to be a good chance for Canada. Hopefully have someone get hot and play well for them.
Okay, I want you to put a stake in the ground today. Who's your starting goalie? Who's starting game 1? And are you trying to go the distance from game 1 to 4 with the same guy? Is that the ideal situation? Or are you just bouncing around throughout the tournament, whoever's hot?
Well, Frank, I wish we were starting on Team USA because it'd be a little easier. But I think I'm going to go with Jordan Binnington. I think at this point, his upside, his relationship with Doug Armstrong, and the fact that he is a guy that is known to be a gamer, right? I think his consistency is going to be the guy they go to. But I think we see multiple guys in this. And I think for Canada, this is the extent of just having a guy get hot at the right time. I keep circling back to that because we talk about the depth of other teams. We talk about Team USA. But in a tournament like this, you can kind of throw that all out the window, in my opinion. It's different if you're building a team for an NHL season where, yes, you're going to need a guy throughout that run. But I think Jordan Binnington is the guy that is going to be Canada's starter come Four Nations Cup.
Okay, so let's flip it around to Team USA then, and I'll frame it this way. Will it be disappointing if someone other than Connor Hellebuck gets a second of work in this tournament?
I don't think disappointing. I think Jake Ottinger possibly gets a game, but with Hellebuck's run and just how good he's been in these last few years in the NHL, I feel like it's his net to lose. And again, this is a guy that just manages the crease so well. He doesn't really put a lot of extra effort, a lot of extra movement. His game is very predictable. And I think for him, this is a good chance for him to really exercise a few demons, right? You look over these last 2 years, having a sub 900 save percentage in the playoffs, and especially his exit last year against Colorado. I think this is a big chance for him to really stamp a mark on his career because he's been so good in the regular season. He just really hasn't got over that playoff hump.
Okay, so now I want to think about it from a different perspective because we know that Team USA has the best goaltending in the tournament. But if you put a Team USA B team in this tournament, would they also have the second best goaltending? So I'll give you some options. And I'm going to claim Joey Decord here. I know that he's a dual citizen, but he only holds a U.S. passport. So that makes him eligible for Team USA. So I'm going to go Joey Decord, Jonathan Quick. If Thatcher Demko is okay, you can throw him in the mix. You've got John Gibson. I mean, you've got tons of options. Would they also have the second best goalies?
I think they would. Honestly, I honestly think they would. And it's a weird state of affair as a Canadian to sit here and not have Brodeur, Cujo, Luongo, years past.
I forgot Stolars.
Stolars is there as well. And again, I thought Stolars was a potential pick as a number 3, just because a guy that could sit on the bench. He's done this throughout his career and get thrown into the situation. But just the fact that they have Thatcher Demko just sitting there ready to jump in, if he was healthy, is pretty impressive on Team USA. But with all that being said, Frank, I'm going to throw that all out the window because this is such a short tournament. You just need one goalie that is capable to be hot at the right time, make a big save here or there. So everyone has a chance at this, but depth-wise, definitely got to give it to Team USA.
Do we not give enough love to, I know we just talked about Team Sweden and we saw their roster, but Philip Gustafsson and his ability in this tournament to maybe be a guy that steals some games?
100%, Frank. And I feel like Team Sweden has these are some 3 big name goalies, right? These are guys, again, that are big bodies, can play well, have been in big moments, right? And I think they all have potential. You have Linus Ullmark, who hasn't had the greatest year playing for the Ottawa Senators. And I think with Philip Gustafsson, his success he's had this year is going to be pretty impressive. And I know that Tyler kind of touched on it about Sweden's back end. I think Gustafsson is the smoothest transition into a guy that's played well. He's played in a lot of big games so far this season. So I think he's going to be a guy to watch in this tournament.
I do think it's funny. Like, we spend so much time talking about the third goalie for Canada, and people will look at Team Sweden and be like, oh man, Gustafsson and Markstrom. But like, at the end of the day, in a tournament like this, if you get to your backup, you're probably already screwed. Like, if your goalie shits the bed in a game, if you get to your third goalie, it doesn't matter. Your tournament is probably over at that point, which brings me to the Sweden versus Finland question. If one of these two teams is going to pull off an upset, again, I think you can look at the goaltending on one end and be like, well, yeah, Sweden's got 2 guys, but UC Saros, I think he's the best of the bunch. Which team, when you look at their defensive structure and also who would be their starting goalie, has the best chance to pull off an upset here?
You know, I think Team Finland, right? I think if we look back at the way they've played in international hockey, just the fact that they get to their game quickly, right? You have a lot of guys that buy in, and you look at their decor and then the way they are up the middle, right? They have some world-class centermen, which I think is going to make it harder to play against some of these elite teams. And for UC Saros, he's a very predictable goalie. He doesn't really make a lot of errors in the crease, and he's been playing on a team where he's had a pretty good season for the Nashville Predators, and he's going to go over there, and I think he's going to be exposed to some more chances. He's known to make big saves. So this is an exciting time, I think, across the board, right? There's so many storylines heading into it. And again, this is going to be ones where we look at Aiden Hill being on the team, Jordan Binnington. Those are 2 guys that potentially never really had great NHL careers if they didn't get hot at the right time and play well in the Stanley Cup. So this is an exciting time, and I think for goaltending and just for hockey in general.
Does Kevin Lankinen have the least Finnish name ever? Do you know any other Finns named Kevin? He trips me up every single time.
Frank, I would be lying. I think early on in Kevin Lankinen's career, when he came to the Nashville, I had no idea he was from Finland. So when he, got hot and stuff like that, I got to start doing my homework here a little more because these names are throwing me off. I thought he was from somewhere in Massachusetts.
That's fair. Carter Hutton from the starting goalies on Daily Faceoff as well, where you're seemingly always hot. Have you been keeping track of how many of your bets you've hit this year?
It's going pretty well here. You know what the fact of the matter is, sometimes, like last night I had an Austin Matthews anytime goal. We got to keep track of the percentages because sometimes I take the long shots out there, but it's been a lot of fun analyzing and you know what, just getting some picks out there to hopefully help some people win some money.
So you can find it on the Daily Faceoff Fantasy YouTube and over on the site under the Starting Goalies tab. Huts, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Everyone in the chat, Brad Lambert as the least Finnish name, but that's a little different.
Yeah, that doesn't count because he spent so much time here in North America.
Yeah, I agree. Daily Faceoff inbox question, hashtag askdfo. Frank, this popped up yesterday, but you weren't on the show. Tyler Seguin and the announcement that he's going to be out for the rest of the regular season with hip injury. The timing of that basically perfectly lining up with the playoffs. Anything sketchy there, you think, or is this honest?
No, I don't think so. I think this has been straight up.
Sagan has been having a very good start to the year as well. Jay is in, hashtag AskDFO. We all know Crosby's wearing the C for Canada. Who gets the C for Team USA, Frank?
Ooh. Man, I'm gonna guess that something of that, someone from that triumvirate of the guys that were first named. Matthews, Quinn Hughes, Eichel. I'm gonna guess Quinn Hughes.
Seems like a decent pick. The Canucks captain. Our poll results for our friends at Dominion Lending Centers. Is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Center. Visit them online, dominionlending.ca. Frank, our results are as follows. Mark Scheifele was voted the biggest snub at 34%, followed by Tage Thompson right behind him at 33%, Zach Hyman at 21%, Evan Bouchard at 10%. Are you surprised that Scheifele won the poll?
I'm not. I don't think he's been talked about enough. I mean, this is, to me, one of the top 15 forwards in the entire NHL, and to be left off of Team Canada because of his defensive liabilities or a one-way game. I know Matt Larkin was all over it, not having Scheifele on his Team Canada roster. I would have found a way to make sure he's on there.
Yeah, and I can totally see that as a lower in the lineup guy. Let's get along to our daily bets for the day, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app, use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. A couple of plays for tonight, starting with the over between Detroit and Ottawa. Detroit expected to go with Ville Husso tonight. He has appeared in 4 games this year and has allowed 3+ goals in every single one, including 2 of those 4 games being partial games. He got yanked in one, and the other one was a relief appearance. His goals against average is well north of 4, and the Senators in their home games this season average a total of 7.08 goals per game. So I love that this number is at an even 6, and I'm all over it. My player prop is Dylan Holloway, 3+ shots on goal, a very juicy +180 for him to go over 2.5. He has hit this in 4 of his last 5. And it is a homecoming game for Dylan Holloway, the product of Southern Alberta. So again, guys are usually fired up. I can see him ripping the puck tonight. Those are my 2 picks for Bet365, which brings us to garbage time to wrap it up, Frank. And how about this? 17 days after breaking his leg, Alex Ovechkin is back on the ice and skating. It's remarkable.
You can't keep the horse down. I mean, he's an absolute beast, and you can't keep him off the ice. I love it. And I bet you he's going to be back sooner than the anticipated time frame. Also looks like did he bulk up here? Is this a thicker Alex Ovechkin? Is that possible? It looks like a tank.
He really does look thick in this. But the original timeline.
We're like, let's get this guy on the ice. He needs more cardio. Hurry up. You got to have him lean out between now and the game starting again.
I would love to know what Alex Ovechkin's day-to-day has been like without playing hockey over the last few weeks.
I would just love to know what his diet's like in general. Like, you've heard players that have played with him before. They said he'd walk into the game with a bag of Doritos or Cheetos. And you're like, what would it have been like had he not done that?
That's totally fair. The original timeline had him back, I think, in early January. So maybe a early Christmas present for the Capitals and their fans if they can get him back sooner than that. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. We will be back tomorrow at noon Eastern with a Friday edition of things. Shout out to our friend Carter Hutton and our producer Pat Puff. Everybody in the YouTube, you are fantastic, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.